I used to babysit in college for extra cash to spend on the weekends. When my schedule would allow it, I sometimes even did overnight shifts. Those were always the most lucrative. You wouldn't believe how much overworked parents are willing to pay to get away from their little brats for just a single night. In my time as a babysitter, I've watched over kids who drew all over the walls in permanent markers. Kids who snuck out of their bedroom at night to play video games until midnight, and even one kid who tried to run away from home while I thought he was asleep. That particular kid made it all the way to the front lawn before I caught him red-handed. But my worst experience as a babysitter by far was watching over a kid who did none of those things. He, let's call him Nicky, was actually one of the better behaved kids I've babysat. As far as I was concerned, that kid was a saint compared to his parents. Nicky was 12 when his parents called me over to babysit. They wanted to treat themselves to dinner and a show in some fancy restaurant miles away from home for their anniversary, so I had an overnight shift on my hands. The pay was far too generous for babysitting a single kid, so I assumed there had to be some sort of a catch. My hunch was proven right when I arrived at the house and saw Nicky for myself. He looked less like the typical hyperactive 12-year-olds I was used to babysitting, and more like one of the sleep-deprived college students I often saw shambling in and out of my classes. Dark circles hung under his bloodshot eyes, and his pallid complexion made him look like he hadn't touched sunlight in ages. He didn't talk much when his parents introduced him to me. All he did was let out a small hi before he returned to silently reading his book. The dad told me that Nicky suffered from insomnia and handed me a bottle of sleeping pills to give him before bed. He emphasized that I can give him only one pill, and one pill only, due to health reasons. Ideally, he shouldn't have to be taking them at all, but without them, he wouldn't get enough sleep to function properly. I assured both parents that I'll make sure he takes only one pill before bed, and they left for their late-night date. Nicky turned out to be surprisingly mature for his age. I invited him to play on the Nintendo Switch I brought with me, but he politely declined. He spent the entire evening reading a YA book on the sofa in silence, only saying a small thank you when I gave him a sandwich I made for dinner. I saw him staring out into space at times, but I chalked that up to a side effect of his insomnia. When 8 p.m. rolled around, I told him to get ready for bed. I could see the dread on his face as he slid off the couch and trudged upstairs without a word. I wanted to ask him what was wrong, but knew that it was probably a stupid question. Whatever he was feeling, it was almost definitely because of his insomnia. I tucked him in and gave him a single sleeping pill with a glass of water. For the first time that night, he made a request. He asked if he could have another pill because one pill hasn't been doing it for him lately. A part of me wanted to give it to him. I felt bad for the kid. I couldn't imagine what he must be going through to need sleeping pills at such a young age. Still, I had to follow my client's orders and didn't want to be held responsible if he got sick from it. Nicky looked disappointed when I told him that I could only give him one pill, but seemed too tired to argue. I turned off the lights and went back down to the living room to get some homework done. At around midnight, I heard Nicky's stifled cry come from upstairs. I rushed upstairs to check on him. My blood ran cold the moment I opened his bedroom door. The light of the hallway provided just enough illumination for me to see Nicky laying on his back in bed, with eyes wide open. Sitting hunched on top of his chest was an emaciated humanoid creature, shrouded in the shadows. I say humanoid, but whatever that thing was definitely wasn't human. Stringy black hair obscured its entire face as it stared down at Nicky's terrified face. Its pitch-black skin had bones sticking out at unnatural angles, and sharp talons grew out from its feet and hands instead of nails. I let out a terrified scream. The creature snapped its head in my direction. Its 2 glowing red eyes stared back into mine, and it lunged at me before I could react. I felt its feet slam into my chest, knocking the air out of my lungs. Its talons dug into my shirt, and I felt its heavy breath against my face. I couldn't move away. My gaze was fixed on its glowing red eyes, whilst it silently stared back at me. Seconds passed, then minutes, then hours. After what felt like an eternity of looking into its eyes, I finally passed out from fear and exhaustion. I woke up the next morning to the sound of doorbells. Nicky was sleeping soundly in his bed, and I answered the door to find his parents apologizing profusely for taking so long to return. Apparently, they both got lost when the dad took a wrong turn somewhere. I pocketed my pay and went home to take the longest nap of my life. When I finally woke up that afternoon, I found a text from Nicky's parents saying how great of a job I did babysitting him. They said that he was more energetic than they'd ever seen him when he woke up that morning. It was like he had had his first good night's sleep in ages. I didn't reply when they asked me if I'd ever come by to babysit again. That creature still visits me sometimes. At night, when I'm just about to fall asleep, I'd feel its weight on my chest and its talons digging into my skin. On those nights, I hope that Nicky is sleeping soundly when I can't. My parents hired a babysitter until I was 13, though it was more for my little sister than me. It's not that I was a particularly ill-behaved child. I can just be a little clumsy at times, so they didn't quite trust me to take care of my then 10-year-old sister by myself. We had many babysitters over the years, but there's one who I'll never forget. Her name was Cindy, and she was one of our regular babysitters. As a kid, I thought she was cool. Every time she came by, she would be sporting a brand new outfit that was always up to date with the current trends. Looking back, I realized that some of the brand name items she had must have cost a fortune, though young me was too distracted by the glamour to think of the price tag. She was one of the more relaxed babysitters I had, too. I wouldn't go so far as to say she was nice, but she always let us do our own thing as long as we weren't endangering ourselves or the house, and even ordered pizza for us once. I'll admit, I looked up to Cindy a bit. She seemed like a cool, easygoing girl. At least, that's what I thought until the last night she babysat for us. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary at first. She arrived at the time my parents asked her to, and sat on the sofa for the next 3 hours or so, while I played with my sister on our Switch. After a while, she sent us to bed earlier than usual. A little odd of her, but I knew she was too lazy to come up to check if we were actually asleep or not. We went to the bedroom we shared and just continued playing video games there. Just in case she came to check, I turned every other light in the bedroom off, and shared a pair of earbuds with my sister while we played. About an hour later, I saw the headlights of a car stop in front of the house through my window. Thinking that our parents came back early, I told my sister to quickly put away our controllers and turned off the switch before they came up to check on us. I took a peek out the window to see if our parents had finished parking yet, but instead of seeing Dad's sedan, I saw a pitch-black van driven by men I'd never seen before. I thought they might be lost and was about to tell my sister it was a false alarm when I saw them get out of the van and approach our house. For once, I was relieved that our parents had hired a babysitter to take care of us. That relief turned to horror when I saw Cindy walk out of the house to usher them into the house herself. I grabbed my sister and rushed us out of the house through the back door. The neighbor let us in after I knocked on their door. When they saw the suspicious black van outside my house, they immediately called the police. The police arrived in minutes and arrested both the men in the black van and Cindy. Turns out Cindy's shopping habits got her into debt that babysitting couldn't pay, so instead she turned to human trafficking. My sister and I were supposed to be her first victims. If you like these scary stories, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Either way, you won't be escaping from the Fear Zone.